Hey everybody, I'm Michael Ruckman, President and CEO of Centeo. We are continuing our series of conversations with thought leaders on the topic of surviving and thriving in a time of coronavirus. Today we're talking with Stuart Lawson, former head of HSBC in Russia and a person who spent the better part of 25 years as a crisis manager for Citibank. So we have got a lot to talk about. Okay, so I'm here this morning with Stuart Lawson, who is currently a senior advisor at Ernst & Young, director at the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce, the Association of European Businesses, also Skolkovo Ventures director, and in the past was a CEO of HSBC, a couple other Russian banks, and probably the most interesting for our discussion today, spent the better part of 25 years with Citibank as a crisis manager, traveling around the world to solve problems. So good morning, Stuart.
Yeah.
How are you today?
It takes a long time to introduce me. And as with all my extraordinary experience, actually it just means I'm old. So,
okay.
Yeah, but thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. So we had an idea today, just same format that we've done with all of these, just a bit of a conversation, and the topics that we picked, obviously relevant to the situation in the world today, is crisis management, and then moving into leadership, and specifically, well, how leaders should be behaving right now, but also what they need to be doing coming out of this. Hopefully, we're coming to an end.
Sure.
Probably
yeah, it's kind of relevant.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Yeah. So what do you think of the current crisis?
It's a Lulu. This is pretty good. I mean, it's been interesting to people have described it. Oh, this is a black swan. You know, nobody saw it coming. Well, the fact is, A, they did see it coming. B, it does have a precedent, and C, it was modeled. So when people say that this came out of nowhere, it didn't. You know, they actually had pandemic crisis managers in the White House until they were fired last year. And I think the thing that's been different about this is it's caused authorities to take actions that we in our lifetimes have never seen. Borders were closed, economies were closed. This was pretty drastic stuff. And I think that's the part of this that really is the black swan, is that the pandemic itself was something that people sort of understood, but closing down entire economies had never been done before. Even during a war, the economy ran, and this is what's been very special about this particular crisis.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we're feeling it, as is everybody else, I think. Obviously, some businesses are hit harder than others. But you think about it, and I remember back to let's say the last half of March, when everybody was saying, "Oh, okay, yeah, so mid-April we should be out of this," and then it was kind of like, "Well, mid-May we should be out of this," and then and here they kind of just tricked us indoors, which is funny. But and I look at Los Angeles last month, they just said, "Forget it, everybody's on shut down until the end of July," and I think there are a lot more cities, geographies that need to do that, because it's still actually spreading quite rapidly. But what do you think about the effect on business? And I think it's getting worse, and the whole idea of a potential second wave coming out of it just looks a little depressing.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. I mean, there's so much material on it. Anybody'd think that everything else in the world had stopped. You know, the only thing that was going on was the virus. If you look at the press and the media, it's just inundated with all these different angles. And I think one thing that everybody's understood is that you can't trust the statistics. I mean, as we came into this thing, these calm, quiet, statisticians, medical guys came on stage and said, we know it all. This is how we're going to measure it. And as time's gone by, it's become pretty obvious that, there's quite a lot of this, they were just, kind of guessing at where it should go and how they should react to it. And I think that if you look at the numbers relative to the numbers of a year ago in terms of total deaths, this is bad, but it's hit a very specific group of people principally. And, sadly, those people have died probably definitely ahead of time, but probably not enormously ahead of time. So, they've lost the last year or two of their lives, but, they're in their mid-80s and they're not well. So many of the people that died were already at that last stage of their lives. But the real impact of this crisis, before you get to the economy, I think, is the the mentality, the psychology of how people are reacting. You know, it's 28 days. If you want to go dry out, you have to go spend 28 days, you know, learning a new habit. Well, we've all spent 3 months learning a new a set of new habits. And so I don't think it's as simple as they open the shops up and then everybody floods out of their apartments and goes back to where they were, because we've all learned new habits. And I think looking at this, consumer behavior and just the way people go about their lives, I think there's a pretty good chance that it's shifted in a way it won't shift back. And in terms of your comments about the second wave, I mean, I look at the media reports of what's going on in the demonstrations, say, in the States. You've got tens of thousands of people running around very closely packed, screaming, well, not screaming, I mean, yelling out the slogans, which is pretty good for the virus, most of them without masks, quite a lot of them then being put into paddy wagons, into police wagons, and then taken off to jail, everybody crammed together. If I was a virus and I was looking like things weren't looking so good, this would be like happy days.
Yeah.
This is perfect breeding ground. And I think it's going to be a real test of whether or not these scientists were right. If we don't see any effect of this in the next 14 days, I would seriously question why we're all spending 1.5 to 2 meters apart, because this is like a test sample. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, they should probably shoot all those people with rubber bullets for their own health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that would help.
Do everybody a favor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's so amazing is that, I mean, the cause is good. We all agree that. But if they had gone out and said, if those were demonstrations, bring back the economy, open up the economy, you know, everybody would be saying, how ridiculous, this is a dreadful thing that you're doing. All you're doing is maintaining the virus. Because they're protesting for a good cause, that's okay. But everybody seems to have forgotten the fact that, you know, last week they were meant to be locked indoors and with no social contact.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the people that were out with their guns because they wanted a haircut, that was one thing. Now they're out.
Yeah, short back and sides or die. You know.
Yeah, exactly. So that was interesting.